Well, welcome back to the Faithonomics podcast. Glad to have you back in the studio. And by studio, in my case, I just mean my office. So it's welcome back in. Dan, I just actually came from coffee, and I feel like I'm a professional coffee drinker at this point in my life.
That's right.
All I do is go around to different coffee shops and
people ask me what I do for a living, and I say I get to go and drink coffee with a lot of really cool people.
Yeah, I think that's it. So on that note, what is your go-to coffee order? Are you the frou-frou pinkies up? Are you like, I'm going to go British and go tea on you? What's your thing?
I tell you what, and first of all, we need to bring our guest in on the conversation as well. We don't want to act like she's not there. I mean, she's right here. So Melissa, you get to jump in on this conversation as well. I'm just a coffee guy. I don't need potpourri in my coffee to make it taste good. Okay. So just give me coffee, a little bit of cream.
So Melissa, I'm looking forward to what you're going to say now. If you are the potpourri in your coffee.
Yeah. Now I do. I'm at the age now. I'm like, I don't need to torture myself with bitter coffee. So I have no problem with some sweetener and some sweet cream is wonderful. But yeah, I don't need some caramel macchiato,
mochaccino, whatever. Yeah.
Give me the drip with a little bit of cream and sugar, and I'm good.
Melissa, what's your go-to? We're sitting down at a nice coffee shop, whatever that means. What's your go-to?
Straight up espresso.
Ooh, there we go.
Black.
Drink it like you mean it.
Black.
But I do like potpourri in my tea. I'm like multidimensional beverage drinker. I like tea. I like coffee.
Okay.
I like it all.
Okay, so coach me up on if I'm going to go in and I'm going to order a tea, what am I ordering?
Well, it depends on, for me, my body's very responsive to caffeine, so I have to be mindful of that. So do you want the black tea? Do you want, which is the highest caffeine? You go down
green
the
tea
oolong,
is basically none, but
oolong, green, white, and then herbal. You get the
so
whole
Dan, you're
spectrum
talking to
of
somebody as
flavors and
well.
options.
Actually, two of us that brew our own kombucha. And I described whatever, and Melissa was like, no, and like dials it in from a tea standpoint of what she does in her
kombucha.
kombucha.
Isn't it connected to witch doctory or something like that? Is it?
It's just probiotics in your tea, Dan.
Good for your belly.
We better move on to our conversation. We're gonna, hey, listen, I'm just a redneck hick from Lexington County in South Carolina. Okay, kombucha. If I walked into some places around here and even said kombucha, some of those.
Bless you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, not wrong. All right, well, Melissa, introduce yourself to our audience. Let us know. We'll obviously be diving through large parts of your story today, but for those that don't know you, give us an intro.
Yep. Well, professionally, I spend my time helping families who are enterprising families. They own, run businesses together to learn and grow and have the support they need to have conversations that matter. On the personal side, I have a sweet husband of, we've been together over 30 years. I'm looking at but married 27, together over 30, and love the Lord. Grateful to be here with you all.
Yeah.
Great to have
you. In your introduction, Melissa, something that kind of, you talked about having conversations that matter. Let's pull that thread for just a second. What kind of conversations typically do you find yourself being invited to at those family business tables?
Mm-hmm. I can describe it in one word, and it's often around conflict, which is always around differences. Differences are normal, and they can be complementary and delightful, and they can grate and hurt. And so often the common thread of what brings families to me is there's some sort of conflict around differences. And that may show up in a leadership space of someone needing to grow. That may show up, completely personal with some life decisions that were made that are causing hurt to the family. It may be more proactive. What do we want to get behind in the world with generosity? But it's typically, and we know this from the research, that decreasing pain is more motivating than increasing pleasure. And so oftentimes when families come to me, they need some help with something that's causing pain in their life.
Yeah. So Melissa and I met, Dan, back at my nonprofit before C12. And actually we met through, we prayed together at least 2-3 years with Frank and Catherine, coming together. Michael and Jerry sometimes were joining. We had a series of, for a time, weekly prayer calls, just because the work, especially in that space, right, and similar to what we do at C12, is this, there are some things that are natural and emotional and whatever, but at the times as well, there's a spiritual root to a large part of that stuff. And so we are on a prayer call, Melissa, I think a couple of years, pretty
That's
regularly,
great.
somewhere in that
Yeah.
range, maybe 2 or 3, I don't know, 4 or 5. It seems in a good way, like a long time. But yeah, fun stuff. So, Melissa, my other thing that I love and I want to dig in is you wrote a book, and I think that's wonderful. Let's tease that out a little bit, because I want to get into some of my summary would be boundaries for family businesses, right?
Mm-hmm. That was actually the call. I like to say I was minding my own business in some quiet time with the Lord, and I just heard him say, write a book on boundaries for family businesses. I was like, I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that? There are wonderful resources like the Cloud and Townsend book, Boundaries. Yeah. I've given out countless numbers of that. There are wonderful resources out there on boundaries already. Why would I want to write a book? And what came over time, understanding often comes over time, especially after we've said, yes, Lord, even though I don't understand, is that, combining family and business itself is a boundary violation. It is combining two things that are inherently different. And so it's hard. And so while there are great books about boundaries out there, put it into the scenarios, the families that I've walked alongside, family businesses, how it shows up in their lives, in their situations, to make it really plain and clear for them.
Yeah. I love that. So for those that don't know, sorry, go ahead, Dan. We're trying to go back and forth, but sometimes we just fight over who gets 2 questions in a row, and I'm just going to just step in and ask.
Keep going. Go, man.
Yeah, I'm going to elbow you out, virtually speaking. So for those that don't know the book Boundaries, maybe start there. So help us walk through kind of the basics, ideas behind. We obviously know boundary, but like there's a lot of really, really neat nuance and new significance to understanding some of the back and forth on that. So walk us through the idea of boundaries first, and then we'll nuance it into family business second.
Well, first, I'd just love to speak to what maybe the elephant or the resistance kind of in the virtual room is that, when I say boundaries, people either smile or cringe. There's not a lot of in between. And those people who cringe often fear that they're against our relationship. Why would we need them if we love each other, if we're family? Why would we need boundaries? Aren't they like walls? Are you trying to control me? There's a lot of, understandably, resistance around it because they've had experience or heard of experiences where it is, it's limited examples of boundaries. Can boundaries be manipulative, controlling? Absolutely. Can any words, be manipulative, controlling? Absolutely. But those people who smile when I say the word boundaries have found how life-giving they are to them as individuals, to their relationships. To put it into a context that our listeners are probably very familiar with, your traditional Christian wedding vows say, forsaking all others till death do us part. That's a boundary. Yeah. That's a boundary you probably want in your marriage. You probably understand that it's going to help your relationship and be for you. So let me define how I use the word boundary. A boundary is anything that differentiates one thing from another. Very broad. Their purpose, they are meant to help promote the good and prevent the bad. So I want to expand people's thinking and awareness and heart towards this concept of boundaries. And now I'll get back to your question, Todd, about some core principles around that. The biggest one is around responsibility. What is my responsibility? What is not? And this gets to the control fear that some people understandably have. What is my responsibility and what is not? And even in those things that are not my responsibility, like your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, those aren't my responsibility because I can't choose them. They are yours. They're your right to choose, but I can influence them. So I'm not responsible for your thoughts, your feelings, your values, your priorities. But if I want us to have a healthy relationship, I want to be responsive to them, meaning that informs the choices that I make. If I make a choice that I know is going to cause pain, hurt feelings, disappointment, I show through how I do that I care about you and that hurt that it has caused, even though I'm not taking responsibility for it. That comes up to kind of take that abstract example into the family business context, succession planning. If you have three very eager, very competent, very capable, very interested family members wanting to be CEO, only one person typically can be that CEO. And so there's going to be disappointment. There's going to be hurt. And I can go through that decision making in a way that says, I care that you're disappointed. I can be responsive to that without getting into false guilt, feeling guilty for something that isn't wrong, and not making that choice based upon what I think the wisest option is.
You made a statement that jumped out to me that I want to tease on that a bit. Family and business are inherently a breach of boundaries. But yet we know historically most businesses are family businesses. And I'll throw this out as a statement, and then you tear it down. Family business doesn't create or cause conflict. What it does is it teases out where the parts of the relationship are unhealthy, and as a result, it just magnifies it. So not unlike you mentioned marriage, not unlike marriage, right? I mean, the greatest discipleship program I have ever entered is spending my life with my incredible, lovely, beautiful wife, Melody, right? It makes me better, but there are places that it reveals in me that are selfish, that are self-centered, that are entitled, that are irresponsible, right? Because that's what's required in a relationship. So in that family business, has it been your experience that typically the business is just revealing, I'm going to say, the cracks, the flaws that are already there, and it just put it under a microscope?
You use the word that I was thinking of, and it magnifies. It magnifies what is there, and it is such a unique context that sometimes if you weren't involved in a family business, you wouldn't encounter it. I'm thinking about a client who, like growing up, the daughter in the family said, like growing up, kids always came to our house. My dad, we called him the king of fun. And then in the business setting,
that's a pretty good title, by the way. I'll sign up for that one.
I love it. He was the king of fun. And now in the business setting, we have a revolving door of employees because of the micromanaging and the control. And who is this man? Who is the real, who's the real dad? So she was seeing and experiencing him in a context, that brought different aspects of his personality more to the forefront that she had never seen and probably never would have seen if they didn't work in business together. So yes, it can magnify what's already there, that pressure of, it's where we put our time, our energy, money into it. We get an impact on our identity, our sense of purpose, good things weigh on those differences. And again, we just enter into situations that if we weren't doing this together, we wouldn't even see that part of us.
But is that a good thing? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It just is. It is, and
I'll wave the flag.
It.
Yeah, I'll wave the flag. I think it's a really positive thing because it refines us. Instead of King of Fun Dad, who he wears that hat and then he takes that hat off and he becomes the you fill in the blankety blank, right? Business owner. It's the same guy. And Melissa, what I've seen is the stress that so many business owners carry with feeling like they got to wear which hat am I supposed to be wearing right now? As opposed to when my identity is rooted in who I am in Christ, and then in turn I show up in that identity regardless of the context. And I have found that to just literally lift the cloud. Lift the cloud for me, so that when I'm in the middle of a business conversation and Melody calls, it's not like there's this metamorphosis that happens, right? And all of a sudden I'm this different, perfect person on the phone. I don't know. I'm just processing through some of the tension that those natural boundaries within a family business create and how we navigate them in a healthy way, which is exactly what you do, right?
Well, we don't grow in the comfort zone. We grow when we're stretched out of it. So I'm totally in agreement with you that it can be for good. Unfortunately, not every family responds to it in a timely basis, responds to it in a constructive way. So it isn't always good,
Yeah.
but we have an opportunity to stretch, grow in our compassion and our humility and our skill. So many things we have an opportunity to grow through this crucible of relationship and family enterprise together.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, you said conflict is typically what brings people in, and that's 100%. The same thing for us on the C12 side. But let's look. You mentioned succession planning. So let's tease that one out. And it's usually dad that's founder, although there's other times for sure, but almost always in that setting. And let's say they've got son and a daughter and a nephew maybe that are as the competent heirs in the business. What is there a prototypical conflict between that you see on the regular where founder leading is looking to retire? Let's hopefully say we've got 4 or 5 years to plan this, maybe 10 even, but is there a prototypical scenario you see on the regular basis of founder led trying to transition in?
The one that comes to mind, and it's just one example of many, but it is kind of stereotypical, is that do we promote based on seniority or merit? And when you get into your example was clever, Todd, because you have not only siblings, but you have cousins, and so then it gets into, are you playing favorites? And what is really an objective measure if we even want it to be upon merit, which can be a very uncomfortable place to be. Is that fair? How do we measure that? So that's a very common example is, whether we base promotion upon family line, bloodline, merit, or, seniority time in.
So I would suggest one of the boundaries, because one of the questions I wrote down here out of some things you said is, what are the typical boundaries in family business that you find breached? Whether it be to Todd's example, from the founder side, let's call it the senior, the patriarch, the matriarch, and then you got the next generation coming through. There are boundaries that can be crossed both ways, right? But what are the main boundaries that you find that people are breaching, maybe not even knowing that they're breaching them?
I'm going to go maybe a couple layers deeper than you
Okay.
might have imagined my response to be, but it's the boundary of what our motivation is. How do I make that choice? Do I make that choice out of faith, out of fear? Do I make that choice based upon how it's always been done or how my buddy does it? The motivation that we choose to operate on, to act on, is a boundary. And sometimes that can be really hard.
Excuse me. So that said, tease that out. What's the anecdote?
Well, to have that awareness. We can't change something that we're not aware of. So to be able to have that awareness, and then to get honest with ourselves and with Holy Spirit's help of, like what do I want my motive to be? Again, is it going to be one out of, tradition or fear? I'm afraid of hurting feelings. I'm afraid of, what this decision could make, or is it going to be one that's based in faith?
So go ahead, Todd.
I love the idea of merit choosing, but again, how do we measure? So let's just take an example. We got the founder here. He's got his oldest son that he's like, all right, he's up next because I'm meritocracy, but I'm also going to go to my oldest son first, and then my second, and then my daughter, maybe the son-in-law first, or as opposed to my nephew's competent. Like, they're going to say, in my experience, yeah, we're going to choose the best man for the job, best woman for the job, meritocracy. But there's a lot of family dynamics. I remember what you're like. You were the kid that stole the keys and drank whatever. Like all of it's easy to see as a dad, and my oldest is 21, but I remember too, like it was yesterday, right? And I remember saving the Halloween candy or not, right? All of those things come into play, but I say meritocracy at the same time. I maybe over-remember something, right? So help that founder out who's going, yeah, I believe meritocracy, of course, the best man for the job, best woman for the job. But what sort of metrics can there be in that space, right? How do you get that founder to not see the history lesson in light of the decision they're currently making? Walk us through that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to highlight what you tapped on. Like even in just traditional family relationships, that can be hard to kind of like get to know each other again and again and again and give each
Hmm.
other the benefit of doubt that you've learned, you've grown, you've matured, sort of thing.
Hope
So,
so.
again, that's a fuel to the complexity of what's going on with these enterprising families. Ideally, I'll get back to your question, Todd, but ideally, families would think about this in advance, like
Yeah.
2, 3, 5 years. We're going to need to make this decision, and it's going to be hard. Again, checking our motives. What do we want to guide our decision? And even letting those, here's the metrics that are going to be used, be actually public knowledge, and for there actually to be developmental support to help people to help each person grow towards that instead of just waiting to that day of, all right, in the next 6 months, 6 days, whatever it is. Now we need to make this decision to have forethought to put in place that governance, those how we're going to make this decision before names, dates, ages, what happened last week is so relevant and so fresh. But what sort of things, might you consider that? Well, there are some that are traditional or common, amongst families. There may be, some formal education. There may be years of experience. There may be, demonstration of, like respect. Do team members respect you? Are you a leader they want to follow or just a leader that you would have to follow if we promoted you to that place? Coming up with metrics. And there was a part two to my thought that it escaped the boundary of my
Well,
recollection.
yeah, girl, listen, you're among friends. Don't worry about that. Coming back to the motivation piece, it feels like that can be a tremendous filter that we can. Why did we start the business to begin with? Right. I know and Todd can speak to this as well. So many of the founders that I'm working with, they had no idea they were going to build an enterprise. They just wanted to live indoors and eat 3 meals a day, right? They wanted to take care of their family. And so they start this business, basically creating a job for themselves. And now all of a sudden I got this business, which I never expected. Yeah. And this goes into the cliche in organizational development. The first generation builds it, the second generation enjoys it, the third generation destroys it. And I think so much of that is because there's a drift away from the motivation. And if that founder can give clarity as to those core principles, the mission, the vision, the values, those kinds of, this is what we built this company upon, and then inoculate everybody with that DNA, right? But what I find so fascinating, Melissa, one of the boundaries that I'd like for you to speak to that I see, especially from the second, third, and beyond generations, is this idea of entitlement. Todd, you even tied on it to. So I'm the oldest son. I am entitled to be the heir apparent. How do you work through that's a boundary that's been crossed. Nobody is entitled to this. How do you work through that with families that really are stuck there?
Yeah. So my working definition of entitlement is exempt from responsibility and deserving of special treatment. And so again, that core principle of healthy boundaries about responsibility. And if, someone is acting, feeling, believing that they are entitled, for the family system to take responsibility, that each person had a contribution to that. If there is a problem in a relationship, if there's a problem in a system, everyone who's a part of that relationship or system has had a role and contribution to it. Some may be bigger, some may be smaller, but owning the part. I'm mom. How did I help create or allow, that attitude of entitlement, sure, that I am deserving of special treatment and exempt from responsibility. Owning that, being responsive to that, and starting to make changes over time. This is such a big, we could talk for hours and hours upon this. I just want to emphasize that it isn't, it isn't cousin Tommy who's a jerk who has the attitude of entitlement. It can't survive without being reinforced in some way. So each person had a part and a contribution to that. So looking at the system, how can we all, support a shift and a change here?
So, Melissa, we've talked about kind of meritocracy. How do we measure that? Checking our motivations, starting in advance. All of those are fantastic. I love your definition of entitlement.
That's really strong.
Let's get downright
Helpful.
practical. So we've got a founder-led business, and he's looking to the heirs. Let's say we're 5 years at least before the transition, which is probably a decent time or ideal time to start.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend that founder needs to start doing to look to figure out competency, have some measurements, see them for who they are? Or what would you recommend to be a first step for a founder-led business who's looking to do some succession planning in or out of the family?
Having objectivity is important, and that 5-year window is wonderful. The young woman that I spoke about earlier, the daughter of the King of Fun, we started 5 years before she was planning to buy the dad out. There's a lot of time there, not only to help potential successors grow, but to support, other team members and clients, vendors, adjusting to that transition as well, letting it be a process. Going back to the entitlement thing, getting out of that dynamic is a process. Mm-hmm. Succession is a process. One tool that I encourage families to use is an assessment such as the Leadership Circle Profile, which is a leadership 360. We all have things that we're good at. We all have things that we're not good at. Let's just get, an objective measure where the individual, as well as others who they work closely with, can kind of speak into where are you now? What are your strengths? What are your opportunities to grow? And using those to help those potential successors or identified successor to grow into preparedness for that shift in power, responsibility that's going to be given to them.
The idea of objectivity in a family business is a bridge too far for some people. Because to your point, it's just layered, right? I mean, this is still my son, my daughter, there's connectivity there, right? And we don't want Thanksgiving dinner to be so awkward. Mm-hmm. So how would you advise, how do you get to objectivity? How do you do that? What are some best practices there? I have some thoughts, but I'd be interested in yours.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure that it sounds like a big, broad question. Can you narrow it down to me?
Well, you mentioned that in order to make that decision as far as succession, the objectivity is critical in that. The problem is we're emotionally enmeshed here. And I mean, those that may not know your background, Melissa, not only are you coming from a really, if you want to call it the nuts and bolts of business background with a financial background, CPA, but you have your master's in psychology. I mean, you're a trained clinical counselor as well as coach. And so how much of this is, okay, we want to be objective. We can look at the measurements of Johnny by the measurements is the one that's the best fit. But Melissa, that's where my heart is. Yeah. And so that's where objectivity becomes skewed. And so how do I get beyond the, if you will, the emotions of this to get to the objectivity to make the right business decision for the family?
Mm-hmm. And multiple examples are coming to mind, similar, where it's like my heart says this, but my head says that sort of thing. Again, just self-awareness, checking motive. All right, let's say you put Melissa in there because that's your heart. How could that be a blessing? How could that actually, what could some unintended, unwanted consequences be of that? And to what degree is that really in her best interest, the company's best interest? Being able to think, like big picture and weigh this. All right, your heart is for her. All right. If she is not the one who it makes sense with more objectivity to promote into this, how can you be responsive to that? How can you support her dreams, her opportunities in other ways besides this poor fit promotion? Yeah. Is being able to think big picture, multidimensionally, long-term as opposed to short-term, be really aware and honest about our motives, and having the courage to, have some conversations
Yeah.
Well, I think
about the challenge of it.
Yeah, I think the objectivity as well can come from something you just said, is the leadership circle profile, some sort of external way to make the squishy quantitative working genius, some sort of personality profiles. Those will all give you some stuff in writing so you can spreadsheet out some things and make the decision less just emotive or knee jerk and starting in advance, right? Those are all some of the principles we've chatted through ahead of time. But as we're going in and you've got that founder who, I don't know, I think through, just to make a dumb sports analogy, when Peyton Manning was injured as a Colts fan, right, and we had Andrew Luck coming up in the draft, it was a difference between your head and your heart of, man, you loved Peyton Manning, but the future looked like Andrew Luck, which turned out not great for us. But anyway, I think sometimes changing the example to think through it in a different light can help the leader think outside of, well, it's my daughter, it's Johnny, it's Melissa, it's you're not thinking through those things. So I think holding a mirror up to founders got to be essential. How do we do that? And I think those profiles, something in that range, is pretty essential. Do you use, outside of leadership circle profile, that you recommend as well, Melissa? I'm guessing profiles in that space.
I do. I think anytime we can have, and they're tools, they're not limitations, they're not perfect, but anytime we can have objective frameworks for understanding differences, the leadership circle profile says strengths, challenges, the 5 voices, personalities, strengths, challenges, differences. Anytime we can have objective lenses to look through to help us understand differences, and to have a shared language to talk around that with families can be helpful. And even case examples, like in the book, there are all sorts of case examples of how families, through applying these principles of boundaries, realized, like wisdom, better options, and were more equipped to handle the challenge and the pain sometimes of making hard choices. So sometimes a case example of being able to see, here's another family who struggled with this. Here's actually what helped them move through that better. Anything, getting that distance. I think you were saying, Todd, that distance from me, my family, my feelings, their feelings, being able to take a step back and be more of an observer of those variables can be very helpful.
We have to deal with the reality. We all have biases. I mean, I think my kid.
But besides
I know. None of us have those, but everybody else. I mean, my kids are the best, right? Mm-hmm. Well, daggone it, I'm their daddy. Of course I think they're the best. I should be biased. The problem is when we allow those biases to skew the objectivity. And one of the things I'd be interested in your perspective on, Melissa, I don't believe any of us are able to see ourselves the way others see us. To have outside perspective, I would bet you most of the clients that you get to work with, the very fact that they were willing to pick up the phone, call you, set up that first meeting, they're halfway there. The heaviest lift of the fact of, I need help, they've already crossed that hurdle. I mean, Todd and I see this at the C12 table, right? When someone comes to the table to say, you know what, I don't have this all together. I need the perspective from outside to help me see the things I can't see. How would you advise those, and we're speaking primarily in the succession space, but even beyond that, how would you advise people to go about bringing wise counsel? You mentioned wisdom a few moments ago, bringing that wise counsel to bear, not to make the decision for me, but to give me perspective that, frankly, I don't have otherwise. Speak to your experience in that.
Yeah. Well, we all have biases. We all have blind spots. Mm-hmm. And, what is it like to be on the other side of me? We need that mirror that Todd mentioned. And none of us is good at all things. And having the humility and the willingness to invite in someone who has an expertise that's complementary and meets a need that I'm having in the moment is a big part of it. And I would say hope. Hope, I feel like, is another part of it. I feel like that's an important part of my initial conversations with families when they reach out, is giving them hope that, I'm not going to tell them what to do. I can't tell them what to do. It's not my responsibility. It's not my right. but I can come alongside them and help them consider things, grow in their skills, have support, to have those conversations, the willingness to show up, be stretched, learn, grow, have conversations, create an environment where it's safe. Might not be comfortable, but safe, to talk about these things. All of those are ingredients that help.
Melissa, I want to switch gears on us a little bit. We've been thinking mainly through the succession lens, which is awesome. But the other one, what I think, especially of boundaries in family business, is what about family members that don't wear the owner or operator hat, right? So you've got a family member, example I heard that's prototypical for me is founding family member gets married, wife's not in the business, and she's always felt like a second-class citizen, but husband didn't really pay attention. Son gets married, daughter-in-law says the same thing, not a part of the family business, I feel not a part of the family. And the second voice in now makes dad realize, anyway, mom was a little bit pissed, hitting him on the arm, going, I told you all these years, you didn't hear it, finally. What do you do with that dynamic of family but not in the family business, right? That's probably the big issue that I've seen in boundaries is I feel like a second-class citizen now because I'm not part of the business.
Yeah. That is such an important decision, and decision kind of refines it too much, but consideration for families to make, because, whenever my husband influences me, your wives, influence you. So you can't prevent, even if you treat them like the outlaws who don't have a voice into this, you can't prevent it because they influence the people who are involved. And so I'll encourage families to to welcome them to a table. It might not be like the ownership table. It might not be like the operations table, but to welcome them to a table. They may have questions. They may have ideas. Give a place for them to have a voice, even if they don't have a vote sort of thing, because they do have influence and you're blind, deceived if you think that they don't. So create a space for that.
So would that look like, so double click on what that would look like, get downright practical. Does that mean we have family business meetings? What would that look like, to use the example of mom and daughter-in-law now are not involved in the business? Do they have what sort of forum would that look like for them to have voice or vote? Navigate through that for us.
I would say, create that based upon what the interest is. Like I'm thinking about a family, third generation family business, the wives aren't involved, will never be involved. But again, they're wives, they influence their husbands, and they, in the discovery process, they have questions. They want to understand some things. So inviting them, all right, if there's a willingness, once a quarter, once a year, whatever frequency it is, like to have a forum where you can ask questions, hear updates from the business. What do you want to know? Instead of just like, here's the ABCs, we're going to give that to you whether you want it or not, to invite it as a dialogue. What would you like to know more about? What would are there things that you want to be able to share, but to create it based upon the interests of the actual family members.
Any other boundaries that you find in your experience that are commonly breached in family business?
A big one that we haven't really talked much about yet is guilt. Bless you. I feel guilty.
I'm muted, so thank Melissa just saw me sneezing, but I'm muted. So
if you're on audio only, Dan's just sneezing it up. No.
Welcome to cold and flu season in South Carolina.
Guilt is a big deal. And I'm just going to bottom line it for the sake of time today. There's more than one variation of guilt. There's the guilt, feeling bad when I've done something wrong. Doesn't feel good, but it's actually for my benefit because it can help me realize, not good, need to say I'm sorry, see if I can make amends, lesson learned going forward. But often, especially in these family enterprise settings, people feel guilty when they haven't done anything wrong. And it's like an emotional straitjacket because there's no corrective action to take. If you take corrective action, you may actually do something wrong and have something to really feel guilty about. And so being able to peel back, all right, if that's false guilt, not true guilt, it is kind of a masquerade to some real emotions. What am I really feeling? going back to our succession examples, maybe I'm feeling sad. Maybe I'm feeling sad because I can't promote everyone. Maybe I'm feeling afraid because I don't know how they're going to handle that decision, or if they even decide to stay with the business. Maybe, what am I really feeling, and being responsive to those emotions. There's true guilt, there's false guilt, and then sometimes it's a mix of it. I may have told you the truth, gone forward with the decision that was the most wise and necessary, but said it in a way that wasn't compassionate to your disappointment and the hurt that you would feel. All right, I need to own that. I need to own that. There's some true guilt there, but a lot of other false guilt, and this goes back to motivations, why I make the decisions that I make. Being able to differentiate between true guilt and false guilt is tremendous in the families that I work with. I often will ask them, like, how much of the guilt that you've been feeling, like if guilt's a big part of what they've been experiencing, how much of that guilt would you estimate is true versus false? And it's very common when one woman comes to mind. She says 90% false guilt. 90% of the guilt I've been feeling has been false guilt. But to have them quantify and again have skills to deal with the real feelings that are beneath that.
What are some of the examples of false guilt that you've seen?
In the book, I talk about a client that I call Tom, who had two of his adult children were involved in the businesses, doing very well with their roles, but they didn't have the skills, competency, or ability to be the executives of the business. And he put off, I think he was in at least his 70s, the succession conversation because he felt guilty and he felt like he had failed as a dad. He had a belief, if my children aren't prepared to lead, then I have failed them as a dad.
To tease that out, it's not just that I failed as a business owner. I failed as a dad.
Failed as a dad.
I mean, it's that we just upped the ante significantly, didn't we? Yeah. So.
Yep. Tom is the example that the whole chapter about guilt revolves around. And so he put off that conversation. And eventually, through our work, it became a conversation with the two children and the other two non-family executives that were very talented. And it was kind of humorous because the two children and the two non-family execs had actually talked about this. The children knew they weren't. They wanted to stay involved. They knew it wasn't their skill set. They were, adored these non-family members and it was their skill set. So they talked about, like, what if each of us is like a quarter owner, that would retain you and reward you, non-family executive, for your huge contribution, but, still give us some ownership. So it's funny, once Tom finally had the conversation, he realized, they've been talking about it. You haven't been talking about it, but they've been talking about it.
Yeah.
They have a comfort level with it. They have a plan. But he had avoided that conversation for decades.
So in some ways, he was the bottleneck, and he was the bottleneck on that.
And they didn't have the courage. They hadn't had the courage to bring that up to him, and we can talk about, what kept them afraid to initiate that conversation. But false guilt can keep us from good things.
So good. Yeah.
So we're talking through hard conversations. I think the point you made really well is I think we're in a different part of our brain when we're reading a case study or seeing a case study, hearing a story of somebody else. And it's easy to find, we see this all the time at the C12 table of, I can beat you up really easily because it's really simple for me to see this on the outside because ... because those are facts on your story, not the emotive tie I have with my son, daughter, etc. Right? And so being able to see something in black and white in print, I think is essential. So for a side note, we'll say it, not you, Melissa. We'd highly recommend grabbing the book, having the conversation, seeing some of these stories in black and white, because then when you go back to your story, you'll see elements, right? I think it's this idea of 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation taken you except what is common to man. To Melissa's point, guilt doesn't have just one version. Greed also doesn't have just one version. Jesus says, watch out for all forms of greed. There's multiple forms of this thing. Oh, that's interesting. But what the core of it is probably more common than it is different. And so being able to see other people's stories, being able to see it in black and white and print, and hearing stories like this to go, oh my goodness, me too. I thought I was the only one. You can find and identify with other people's stories, get some truth, take some of those conversations. So to kind of maybe put a bow on it, if somebody were to take away one step from this, Melissa, what would be the one thing you'd take away, primarily to that founder, to the Gen 1 builder, maybe to the son or daughter that's going, I'm in this family business. We're not having these conversations. What's a practical next step you can have them do to walk out of here going, man, I'm glad we had this hour together? What would be a next step you'd recommend they do?
Yeah. My thoughts are going back to a thread in our conversation around like motive. All right, I'm struggling with this. What's the root of that? I'm leaning towards this decision. What would be the motivating factor for that? To get honest with self and invite Holy Spirit's, wisdom as well. What's really going on here? What's making it scary? What's making it hard? What's making me want to do this? And to seek wisdom, to invite wisdom, to be our guide and to give us the courage and the comfort to sometimes stretch outside of our comfort zone. And wise counsel, that can help, because again, we all have blind spots.
Yeah. Melissa, your input today, there are a lot of people who are going to be better thanks to your wisdom and to your skill. Where are the best places if somebody wanted to reach out and get in touch with you? What's the best channels and avenues for them to do that?
Mm-hmm. My website, I'm guessing you all will link, is my name, Melissa Mitchell-Blitch, .com. And the book is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. I'll read it to you.
Hey.
You don't have to sit down and read it. I'll read it to you. It'll only take 4 hours. So it's very portable. You can take it on a walk.
I don't think we've actually named the book yet. What is the name of your book, Melissa? In the Company of Family, How to Thrive When Business is Personal.
Such a powerful title too. Todd and I, we have multiple people on almost every day. We're engaging people that are wrestling with the very issues that you've addressed today. So thanks for some really practical handholds there. Encourage our listeners. You need to go check out that book. It's going to be helpful to navigate those difficult conversations in a way that's mutually respectful, mutually nourishing. Flourishing is what we're looking for, right? So what a powerful story. Thank you for your investment in our audience today.
My great pleasure. And I'll just say, even if you don't work with family, I'm guessing your listeners, they care about their team members, their employees, their vendors, their, co-owners. The principles, apply equally regardless of that legal structure. But it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you for the invitation.
I think we end it this way. Melissa, we've asked our guests to pray over our audience, kind of related to some of the stuff we talked about. So I would love it if you would end our time with prayer for that family heading into these conversations that they potentially have avoided, potentially not. But if you could pray over that family heading into some of these succession planning, role, motive conversations, I think that'd be a great way to end it.
Yeah, I am glad to. Well, I just want to say, Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of your Holy Spirit who is here to lead us into all truth. Yeah. We ask for wisdom and we receive your comfort. And I just pray, Lord, that each person that hears this would have the clarity of your guidance for them, that they would know even just that next step to take and would have the boldness and the courage to take it, trusting you to order their steps and continue to walk with them each step of the way, aligning their steps according to your perfect will. So come, Holy Spirit, have your way in and through our lives to the glory of God. Amen.
Amen and amen. Bless you, Melissa. Thank you for blessing us today.
My pleasure. Appreciate it.
Another fun
one, dude.
Yeah. I wish more small to medium-sized business owners would engage the Melissas of the world to help them navigate this, because the wisdom that she brings, and it's just invaluable, man. Invaluable.
Well, I go back to 1 Corinthians 10:13, right? It's our story might be unique, but it's not rare. And there's other people that have gone through this before, and being able to get outside of our story, in her constant refrain of checking your motives, of going, hey, are you doing this? Do you want to join the business because you want to run the business, or because you like the ownership entity part of it, right?
Yeah.
And hey, we can separate all three of those hats differently. Family member can be different, operator can be different, owner can be different, right? We don't need to have 100% unanimous across the board there. And just because you're family doesn't mean you're a good operator or a good executive, or you should be in sales, but your gift's really here.
You know, if there's
Checking
one thing,
all those conversations is essential.
if there's one thing I wish we'd have got Melissa to pull out more on, because I think it's in her book and certainly all over her website, clarity is kindness. Having the problem that I sense with so many family businesses is they're just afraid to have the conversation. But just understand, the conversation's being had, just with all the wrong
for
people.
illustration, Dad's not talking about it, but the executives and the kids already have.
That's right. So, you know, these boundaries that we need to, let's demystify those things. Let's diffuse them. That's probably the word. Let's diffuse that bomb, but let's just have the conversation so that, you know, yeah, we can have the conversation about what's your role in the long term. Whether, you know, we talked a lot about succession today, but even in the day-to-day operation, what's that look like? Because here's the fact. If you share the last name of the owner, everybody in the business thinks you're the boss.
Yeah.
So we've got to navigate that in a way that's healthy, not just for the family relationship, so that we don't unintentionally create. We talked about entitlement a bit today. I love that definition she gave. Entitlement, exempt from responsibility, and sensing you deserve special treatment.
Yeah.
We disarm that when we have the conversations.
Yeah. I totally agree. And part of it is the assumptions we're making we need to challenge, and motivations we need to challenge, and getting objective data, whether it be Working Genius or the DISC or Culture Index profile, and you know, all of these personality profiles do some aspect of the story and are great tools to utilize. 5 Voices, all of these, right, are fantastic at some aspect of this. But being able to see something objective, being able to have a framework to walk through the discussions is awesome. So great podcast for today.
There's one other thing I want to bring to the forefront again, because she talked about motivation. Business owners, if you have not clearly defined your core principles, why are we in business? How are we going to do? What do we do every day? If you want your mission, your vision, your values, who we are, what we do, why we're doing it, who we're going to be as we're doing it, and you haven't drilled those down, you're doing yourself and you're doing your successors a massive injustice. Spend that time, get clarity there. And that becomes the filter, not only for yourself, but for your other family members, even like she was talking about, the family members that are not active in the business. They get it. They know what the map is. So that's a big get. And you probably need somebody from the outside to help you do it.
Yeah, even if it is just a consultant to come in like Melissa, and you can definitely reach out and hire her, or get some sort of peer advice where other people are coming alongside you, giving you the outside advice. Getting somebody to hold that mirror up to you,
right,
even if it's an assessment, right? That'll be some aspect of doing this. But if you can get around with people who love you, care about you, and are not on your payroll, even if they're separate it's different.
100%
right?
agree.
You've got to have this mirror held up to you to go, okay, this is where we are. This is the facts. This is the situation. And once you see it much more plain and objectively, the story makes sense when you have all the facts, right?
It brings clarity. It brings clarity.
I hear that's kind. I hear it's kind.
Thank you, Brandon.
Do you know what else is kind, Dan? Subscribing to and smashing that like button.
You like to say that word, smashing.
I like smashing it. It feels more fun than just click.
I like it.
And maybe one of these days they'll try it and like the thing, to smash the like button, to be like, but to make sure you got to do it. If you do it twice, you got to do it a third time to make sure it stays on
even better. Share this with friends that might benefit from the conversations.
Or hypothetically, with this one today, send it to your son or daughter or nephew or partner to say, what of this stuff do we need to chat through?
100%. 100%. Thank you for those of you who've stuck with us and listened this long. You know, our banter can get
Awesome is what
awesome.
it is,
It's awesome. It's right. And we love having you. Any way we can serve you, you can find us. We'd be thrilled to have the conversation with you if we can be helpful. But until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for tuning in. See y'all.